Hi everybody. For those who are in the room, you already know who I am, but for the purpose of the camera, I'm going to say it again. Hi, I'm Ethan Sumner. I'm the co-founder and CEO of CommuniStack. We're on a mission to build the next generation of social infrastructure. We have 21 communities, 10 conferences, and we build platforms for community groups and the third sector, including a lot of focus on accessibility. But I'd like to welcome two exceptional panelists to the stage today. We're going to be talking about consultancies and kind of how things are evolving in the age of AI and how the industry has moved in general. So first I'd like to welcome Ben to the stage. So there you go.
Hello everyone, I'm Ben Davison. It's actually quite nice to be here because normally at this point I'm like arguing with two pre-teens in a recursive loop around whether they should be eating their vegetables or not. So it's nice to be here with some adults. So I'm one of the founders of Axiologik. We've got three founders. So we are a 9-year-old, I guess we're a scale-up now. So we are 120 people. We turn over just less than kind of 20 million now. So we're kind of gone beyond kind of startup and now kind of stuck in that kind of difficult kind of mid zone in terms of like, are you small or are you not? And we do three things really. So the first one is we kind of shape, design and deliver kind of large portfolios of digital change. So just make that real for you. We led the setup of the vaccination service, kind of like during COVID. The second thing that we do is we help organizations become good at delivering kind of software and technology. Again, just to kind of put some flavor on that. So for those of you that are familiar with kind of team topologies, kind of now the Matthew Skelton work. So Matthew was part of our team at the Home Office, and a lot of that book is based on kind of work that we did about 8 years ago at the Home Office. And then the last thing is we help organizations get kind of tangible outcomes from modern technology and engineering. So things like, get real benefit from kind of cloud, AI, SRE, that kind of stuff. That's us.
Hi, I'm Alex Manley. I run the sales team at Colibri Digital. So Colibri is I would say, a boutique specialist consultancy, and we specialize in AI, data, and cloud. We have a number of practices ranging from the advisory, strategy with AI. We have other pillars, which are a data practice specializing in unified data platforms, which is a foundational component of when you want to accelerate your AI. Obviously, cloud with the foundations of getting your cloud right. And we go all the way to software engineering and software delivery excellence, all the way to managed service. So we do the full range, I guess, from advisory, design, build to run. So, yeah.
Awesome, thank you very much. And myself and Alex used to work together at Contino, which is now part of Cognizant. So we're going to go on to our first question. So this panel is very much centered around AI, because I think a lot of consultancies are focusing on that. So firstly, how is AI changing what clients expect from technical consultancies? So has there been a shift from delivery to more advisory, for example?
So most of our customers are kind of like more at like the enterprise kind of level. So they tend to be like central government departments or kind of FTSE kind of 250 and above. So there's still, and I think there will be for the foreseeable future, kind of like lots of kind of delivery kind of going on. I think like AI is a bit like an out of control kind of fire hose in these sorts of organizations. So there's lots of stuff kind of like happening, but like what's it for? Like who's commissioned it? Like what's the purpose of it? Ultimately the work still needs to get done. So I think for the sort of like the foreseeable future, there will still be like a significant kind of market for that kind of traditional kind of outsourced kind of software development or, kind of build partner type model. But I think, that's only going to last for a certain period of time. And I think there'll be a period of like retrenchment around AI as well. So when people get kind of found out around some of the cybersecurity implications of kind of like what they're doing and some of the information kind of governance stuff, I think, there'll be people will kind of slow down a little bit. But you can't get away from like the inevitability of the fact that it's going to change. And I think the kind of the traditional outsourcing market, I think, is going to come heavily under pressure. I think organisations that typically have outsourced stuff will start to rethink about, do we insource, do we outsource? Where they continue to outsource, I think margins will come under pressure, especially for organisations that say that they've got an AI component. It's like, well, I want to see that in the pricing, I want to see that in the margins. I'm not going to pay for junior folks anymore. Like, I want to get the outcome, and I want it to be cheaper. So I think that kind of business model is going to come kind of significantly kind of under pressure. I think, so like just kind of summarising then, kind of short term, I think there'll be a bit of like mopping up in terms of some of the kind of collateral damage that's kind of been done. But then I think there'll be a lot of focus on, okay, so now we need to do this properly. So like, what's the problem we're trying to solve? We need to get our data ready. We need to think about the implications of the work that we're doing, kind of guardrails, ethics, all that kind of stuff. Kind of medium term, I think it's more into the, like the business model's going to change now. So, and I think that for consultancies, it's going to be a shift from actually delivery to more enablement and helping kind of these larger organizations focus on the stuff that's kind of really valuable to them, which is like the knowledge work. It's the human related stuff, the stuff where there's kind of complexity to solve. It's not the deterministic kind of software kind of development. So I think medium term, that's going to result in a bit of a paradigm shift like in the market. And I think it, for those like bigger organizations, like, I don't want to name names, like, who they are. I think it's going to be quite a difficult kind of time, a very disruptive time for them. I know it's hard to kind of see that now when you look at like lots of organizations are in a bit of a mess, but I mean, there is a sense of inevitability about it, and that's the way it's going to go. So I think as a consultancy, you have to start thinking about how do you get in front of that.
Thanks. I echo all of that, actually. So I think where we are with AI is kind of where we were in 2016 with the sort of adoption of cloud within the enterprise. A year ago, people were talking about what is Gen AI, and now people are starting to use it and really want that advice and the guidance of what to build rather than actually doing the work. So, you can get, 70% of your work done for doing your analysis, getting your documentation and your code done, and 30% is really left on the sort of human angle to make sure it's right and doing the checking. So again, the cost model of consultancy will probably change as customers demand that, you've got these accelerators and you're using less people. So, as consultancies, I think you've got to be thinking more about the outcome rather than resources on, bums on seats, if you like. So yeah, it's an interesting time to be, and I agree. I believe there will be a wave of, people coming and saying, right, we've done all this vibe coding, and how do we get it into production, or it's not worked, and so there will be that kind of mop up, I guess. And the other thing is, is on the top agenda at board level, the C-suite. And so a lot of them want to know, how can we use AI and stop us looking stupid? So, get the strategies, the governance, the audit, the security right, and probably retrofitting what's been done and as POCs and things into, that enterprise grade, if you like. And so that's why I kind of compare it to that kind of cloud journey that we were on probably about 10 years ago.
Yeah. And I think just to kind of add on that is that, to both points, is that going from POC to production with AI is kind of now actually it's at a stage where a lot of enterprises are, putting AI, in production, everything's going well. But back when the kind of whole thing started is that I remember seeing a statistic that 95% of a certain CSP's kind of AI POCs never went into production. So it's kind of good to see that that market is shifting now and we're actually getting a lot more work done. And also the kind of valuable AI use cases going out into the market as well. But really interesting insight. So the next question we have is, what does a future consultancy team and a squad look like? So this is slightly more people focused, but...
Yeah, so obviously with AI you can do a lot more, and you are seeing, the traditional, big four having a managing partner at the top and an army of, junior engineers under them is going, right? The customers are expecting you to do things quicker, right? So before you do a 6-week POC, now it's like, show me what you can do in a week. And I've always been a big believer before AI that, if you have a small squad, the pizza-sized teams of good engineers, you can get a lot done. With AI, and having the right domain experts in your subject area, along with the principal or senior AI engineers, and maybe 1 or 2 developers, that you still need to get the cloud infrastructure right, you still need the right data, right? So it's a sprinkling of the team size that you used to have before, and more kind of, I guess, T-shaped, experienced people. So, you've got a breadth of experience in different technologies, but specializing in different areas. So I can just see them getting smaller, and customers will demand, smaller teams. And it will change again to be, let's sell outcomes, right? And so it doesn't really matter about the team size. You're selling the value of what they're getting at the end of it.
So I agree with all that. I mean, just come back to what I was talking about earlier. I think we've always wanted like software development processes to be kind of idempotent and like defined inputs, defined outputs, that kind of stuff. And I think if we get kind of use of kind of AI right and with the right frameworks and kind of the right controls in, then we can kind of get relatively kind of close to that. So I think kind of consultancy teams in the future will be more around like the knowledge work, like the problem to be solved, the dealing with people, kind of coordinating at kind of large scale across different kind of product teams. Like most organizations are these kind of complex adaptive kind of systems of people, processes, politics, that kind of stuff, and that's difficult for technology to navigate. It needs people to do that. And I think that a lot of the simple defined inputs, defined outputs will be commoditized and will go, and kind of consultancy teams will be more around how do we find the right problem to solve, but also how do we kind of set the frameworks up, and how do we set the tooling up, and the governance and the ethics and the guardrails and the standards, so that the kind of the more kind of stuff the more kind of deterministic stuff can be commoditized. So I think my view, that's where it will go. So more framework teams, more enablement teams, and then kind of more people focused on how do we solve the business problem. They sound like they're having a really great time upstairs. I feel like I'm missing out slightly.
I just want to add also. Sorry, I just want to add that you want to have these experienced people, and I guess everyone's worried about what's going to happen with junior roles with AI taking over everything. And I still think enterprises are going to have to look about what they do with their graduate training and programs, but you still need to have people that are validating the outputs of what AI produces and have that human element, and looking at the edge cases and bringing that knowledge back into the AI to make sure it's training and it's improving all the time. So I do see a need for junior level resources, but rather than doing the work, they're sort of looking at the outputs and the edge cases, I would say.
I mean, the other thing that we don't really know is like there is this kind of impending cost apocalypse, isn't there? It's like everybody knows that like we're kind of in this like first one's free model, aren't we? So like at some point it's not going to be free anymore, and it's a bit like bait and switch, or kind of like whatever the analogy is. So like when the costs start to come in, I think we're starting to see that with like GitLab and other stuff at the minute. Then it's like, is that nirvana of you can just give all this stuff to the AI? Is that real? Is it not real? I don't know, like, honestly. So we'll have to kind of see where that goes. But there's going to be that, like, if you remember the whole, I guess from a cloud perspective, when everybody suddenly found that they were going out of business because they hadn't thought about how they're going to control the cloud costs. Like it's going to be the same around AI, like, and people thinking about like intelligent kind of routing between kind of frontier models and kind of locally hosted models, and like the kind of FinOps kind of stuff for AI. So, I mean, it's kind of there's a lot of guessing in what the consultancy team of the future kind of looks like. And I think what happens with the cost and what they really cost to kind of use these services, I think, is something that I don't think we really understand yet. But I think we do understand that it's going to be, I mean, if you're familiar with like the N-shittification stuff, it's going to be kind of like N-shittified kind of like to some extent, and then we'll have to work out what that really means.
It's a very interesting insight, and actually the FinOps Foundation, so my background is in FinOps. I can go on it for a while, so I'll keep it very brief. But the FinOps Foundation actually launched tokenization yesterday back in San Diego, FinOpsX, so they're now looking at the AI side, and it is an interesting one. And I think for me, actually, the value in, I think actually, the kind of the more really high caliber individuals that work for these, organizations and consultancies is that gone are the days where it's just like, we've just got a DevOps engineer and they can learn JavaScript in a few days before we put them on the client side. It's like, no, actually, we want real world experts. And that's kind of who organizations are wanting and can be charged out, etc. So we're going to move on to our next question. So, what excites you most about the consulting industry going forward?
So,
positive or negative?
no, it's all positive, right? It's such an unknown what AI can do in the future. I think, what we will be looking at, as you said earlier, is more about enablement. How do enterprises use it and implement it correctly? I agree there is going to be a wave of, come and fix what we've broken before. So, I just think it's an exciting time to be there. There's so many issues around, security and governance that no one's quite got right. You're going to start having organisations with thousands of agents being spun up and having to have that. That access rights to all of the different APIs and systems, and we've just kind of handled system to system and person to system access management. Now you've got thousands that are spinning up, having ephemeral access, and then how do you have that traceability and get that right? So there's so many different issues that I don't think have been addressed. It's there's a lot of work to do.
I'm probably a bit older than some of the people in the room, so the thing I'm probably most looking forward to is like retirement. But like in terms of most looking forward to in terms of the consultancy industry, I think there's an opportunity for kind of technology to kind of step much further left into like what does the business look like and how does it operate. Which you kind of started with like the kind of DevOps kind of movement and bringing kind of business and kind of technology together, and then product-led operating models and that kind of stuff. But there's a real opportunity for not just in the process of value creation, so kind of software development, but in like what are the services that people interact with, like how do they look, how do they feel, how do you kind of improve them. I think there's much more opportunity now for kind of technologists to get involved in what do those services look like and like how do they run. So I think that's the most exciting thing, is the opportunity for me, for the technologists to kind of step further left into kind of how the businesses kind of run. So, but I think that is just an extension of a journey that started like a long time ago. I think some of the tools and technologies that we have now just make that easier for technologists to be kind of real partners with the business on how the business runs.
Can I just add to that? So, I remember when you used to talk about DevOps quite a lot. There was a sort of there was a meme that you had to be this tool to get on the ride, and you had to get what it meant was you had to get the foundations in place, right, before you can really do DevOps. I think the same is with AI, right? So you need to have the right foundations of cloud. It's got to be cloud native. You've got to be able to spin things up, tear them down. You've got to have the right security in place. You've got to have the right the unified data platform. So many companies have disparate data and systems that make it very hard for AI to really do what it could do if it had access to the right data at the right time in an elastic cloud environment that's secure and governed. And so, a lot of organisations are not there, and you do need to get those foundations in place first. And so there still is that work to do before everyone goes and does the cool AI applications and work.
Definitely. Interesting insight. So we're going to move on to our final question before one from the audience. So what new opportunities is AI creating for consultancies that did not exist a few years ago?
I think, you know, some of that we've kind of covered to an extent. I think there's an opportunity for kind of real kind of tech-enabled rethinking how businesses work. I think that's an exciting opportunity. It's probably the most exciting opportunity, I'd say, helping, you know, just fundamentally rethink how value gets created in a business. It's normally like the realm of like the McKinseys and like the BCGs and that kind of stuff, but it's an opportunity for kind of technology to drive a rethink of how businesses operate.
Yeah, I think, you know, you're right. The big four have got a big threat coming, right? Because suddenly you can do a lot more with a lot less people. You can get that knowledge that you would normally pay for historically. But now I think the market's got bigger because it's, you know, it's accessible to smaller companies and, you know, SMEs and charities, and, you know, that's where I think, you know, it could open up with just a lot more people being able to access consultancies to do, you know, work that traditionally would be done with enterprises and the big four.
And, you know, I think there'll be, from the large organisations, there'll be a lot of kind of reactionary kind of moves. So, like, we need to protect the position. Like, you know, a lot of the big outsourcers, you know, they've made their kind of money on selling in kind of graduates, people not far out of university. That's where they make the money. So, I mean, obviously that model's going to come under pressure. So I think it's an exciting time for startups and kind of scale-ups that aren't encumbered by that model to, you know, to find a voice and have an opportunity to, you know, get conversations about disruption that probably they wouldn't have had a few years ago, because those conversations would have been dominated by the larger organisations. But I think a lot of clients will see through that, and they'll want to have conversations with more innovative organisations moving forward. So that's my hope anyway.
Yeah, interesting. So we're going to go to one question from the audience. Yeah, would you like to?
Thanks for that. It's interesting to hear what you say, and a lot of what you were talking about has very much got a technology and delivery focus. But with what's happening with AI and what's happening with some of the things, as you've alluded to, the business model for some of the big consultancies is seriously under threat. And the old day rate, let's charge for putting lots of people in and then deliver vaporware, we hope is disappearing, but there's going to be a resistance and a backlash to that. The problem or the challenge within that is probably twofold. One is the resistance or to change, because people think, oh, we're going to get the right result from the big companies. And the second thing, is there the understanding? You've talked about some of the potential for sorting out some of the systems, for dealing with security and all the rest of it. Yet many of the organizations I work with simply don't understand that. They don't have proper strategies, they don't have proper coordination of strategies. The business strategy and the technical strategy, if they do exist, certainly don't link up. How do we overcome those sorts of problems? And how do we present the offering in a way that we can get that buy-in, we can create that understanding, and we can deliver the value that's necessary to move away from that legacy model, if you will?
There's quite a few questions in there, so try and like distill that down. I guess the first one is if we're not like A grade at kind of doing software development in the first place, when we start to do kind of more of it through vibe coding and like other stuff, then obviously the risks associated with that become more. And we did a bit of oh no, sorry, there was an article in, I think it was the Register, which was saying, you know, I think it was saying like a high number of developers using kind of AI for kind of code generation and knowingly shipping code with vulnerabilities in it. And it's like, yes, but like, how is that any different to like now? Like, you know, it's just the same, but it's just like more of it. And I think in answer to your question, it's always been a hope that organisations will get in front of these problems because they realise that the problem's coming, but they don't. So, and I think when we talked earlier about some kind of retrenchment, I think it will take some fairly significant adverse events for people to start like waking up to the reality of what's happening. I'd like to think that, you know, all the stuff that NCSC does around like trying to educate us all on why we should be high maturity on the cyber like assessment framework and that kind of stuff, a lot of it is just going to fall on deaf ears. So I think the reality is there'll need to be some big breaches. Some people need to go out of business, and then we'll probably start to take it kind of seriously. There needs to be some kind of external stimulus, really, in order to do that. Because, you know, like, I think that the point of the Register article was, we're spending all our time on AI code generation, but we could have spent an equal amount of time building kind of security reviewer agents and so on, and got good results. So why haven't we done that? And I think there'll need to be some kind of like stimulus to kind of make that happen. The second question, I think, was how do we get larger organizations to move away from traditional kind of outsourcing models, like the nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM type model. And I mean, great question. I think the route to that will be one is organizations rethinking whether they outsource or they insource. And the second thing will be about, I'm not paying that much anymore. So like, show me I want to see a drastic reduction in the cost of the services that you provide. Otherwise, I'm going to rethink my decision about insourcing or outsourcing. That's my view. Might not be right, but that's what I think will happen.
Yeah, I mean, people don't like change, and I don't think the Big Four and the traditional ways of consulting is going to go anywhere soon. But I think there is a wave coming where everyone expects to do things faster and cheaper using this, and I think that is an opportunity for companies like yours and myself, more smaller boutique, to go in and show value, more value for less time and less cost to the customer. So, yeah.
It's a 10-year horizon, though, like, isn't it, for this stuff to happen? It won't happen like overnight, but at least.
We've got a 30-year history to overcome because projects and programs are still being run in the same way. Yeah, I was saying we've got a 30 or 40-year history to overcome because projects and programs are still being run in the same way that they were 40 years ago, fundamentally. And so there is a huge inertia to change in that. But I think, or I'd suggest that the other thing to add to that equation is quality, because the level of quality we need to demonstrate as consultants or smaller businesses or whatever needs to be a differentiator so that you can actually stand by it. And I think the other thing I'd suggest is ownership, because a lot of the time big consultancies go in and they produce something and they walk away from it unless they can come back and redo it or refine it, whereas actually trying to get the client to own the outputs and to be part of the outputs and to be intimately involved with those outputs is really important.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's the insourcing versus kind of outsourcing thing, and them thinking about building their kind of own internal kind of sustainable kind of capabilities and more ownership of those services. But you're right, I mean, there is an oil tanker. I note that Accenture were just awarded a long-term deal to build and run the Horizon replacement. It's like, have we not learnt?
Yeah.
That was a total disaster. The Horizon debacle was a complete disaster.
Well, it's not just Horizon. There are lots of other examples.
It's everywhere, yeah.
But
I mean, like you look at the, large government departments are, doing 7-8 year contracts on things. So there's nothing guaranteed to stifle innovation like an 8-year contract.
This is back to that trust discussion, isn't it? Because those civil servants trust big organisations because they think they're trustworthy. Right?
I think.
Well, they feel like that's the choice that won't get them fired.
So I feel sorry for government, actually, because 5 years ago there was a real SME agenda. And I think through the lack of personnel to kind of let and tender those contracts, they've moved back towards kind of larger contracts because they've only got so much kind of mind share and time, and actually they need to kind of let it to bigger organisations. So I think the government has definitely shown willing over the years towards kind of smaller businesses. It's, I think it's a different environment now, but I think the willing is there.
Okay.
I think just interesting on the long-term contract thing, and we'll go on to one final question, is I just wanted to add this bit. So funnily enough, so Police Scotland formed, I think it's 14 years, when they kind of merged all the police forces in Scotland. And the original plan is that they were going to do all the IT merger and transformation in 2 years because it would save on average about 210 million. Now, they've only just completed this week. It's been 14 years. So, it's kind of interesting is that for a lot of large government organisations, enterprises that have hired these kind of, larger consultancies sometimes that haven't got that expertise or the nimbleness or being there, is that, these kind of things can happen. So we're going to go on to our one last very final question. We've got someone in the audience who is keen, so we'll just pass over the microphone.
Thank you. So my question is, okay, let me give a synopsis. Consultancy is predominantly a skill-based area or role, if I should put it, and talk of the infiltration of augmented AI, not particularly replacing the human element. We've got the rise in augmented AI and the huge investment going towards staff training, staff upskilling, and yet there's only very little percentage of the human element, say about 40% of the knowledge gained that goes into all these processes, because yet these large organizations are establishing very complex infrastructural systems in place. So where lies the divide? Where lies the value in upskilling of the staff? However, yet they are putting in place very complex systems. So where did they get the balance right in order to improve their bottom line?
It's a good question. So I think, people haven't really understood, and it's an experiment, right, of where the value is coming from with AI. I think there's a lot of hypothesis that, we can use AI to go in and, convert all of your legacy systems into new, turn from COBOL to React. I think Morgan Stanley had a program of work where the hypothesis was they were going to save, 70% of the actual graft work and the coding by doing it. And actually, after a year's program, the value was they saved 10 or 12% in time. So, it is an experiment. And to answer your question, I don't know where that balance is. I think it is a learning curve for everyone on, how to use AI and how it's going to improve the value to your business. Where do you direct your energies? What products should you be building? And I think that's where consultancies can really add value. They can go in and they can show this is where you should be focusing your attention and what you should be building using AI for. Do you want to embed AI within your products, or do you want to be using AI to develop your products? Where's the balance? Yeah. Sorry, I don't answer your question, but I don't think it's a known.
I think we were talking earlier, and I think you were doing some kind of research in this space, so you probably know more than we do. I think probably the analogy is probably around the hyperscalers in cloud. They'll step left from, started off doing kind of basic infrastructure kind of virtualization, moving towards kind of more kind of embedded kind of platform capabilities. And I think the large scale AI kind of providers will do that. They'll just gradually step left and try and eat kind of everybody's kind of lunch. But the right answer is not just to rely on these kind of frontier kind of models all the time. So I don't know the answer to the question. I think there's a few dynamics around kind of cost, viability, kind of et cetera, that we need to kind of work through, and then we'll be able to form a view on what skills are needed. But yeah, I don't know the answer right now, but it's a great question.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much to both of our panelists for coming out this evening. Thank you, especially Ben, who came all the way from Leeds, so thank you.